he was a genius. Thank you.
Is that you, Kat? Yeah. It's a bit unpleasant today, huh? Yeah. Hello, Kat.
No, this is the day.
It's beautiful. It's just not so nice to go outside.
No, but it is nice weather.
Okay, guys, let's get going. So, what I'm going to do is that. There we go.
Her Hebrew name's Chana Miriam Bat Leah.
Okay, so we'll do this as a first lema for Chana Miriam Bat Leah. Also in the space of all those people who passed away in Meron this morning, last night, and also in the first lema for those who are injured still. Not so simple. What I'd like to look at is I want to do two things. I want to do something a bit on Lag BaOmer, and I want to do something on Kohelet. So we'll start with Kohelet, just to get back into Kohelet. We'll do just the one pasuk, or maybe more, depending, how it goes. And then we'll discuss something specifically about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Meiro and all the stuff that happens. Okay, so possibly starting in Perek Chet, again from the beginning. Mi ke chacham, who is like a chacham, umi yodeya pesher davar, and who knows pesher davar. Pesher davar means the explanation of the thing. Chochmat adam ta'ir panav, the wisdom of the person ta'ir panav, lights up his face. Va'oz panav yeshuneh, and oz panav, the oz is like the strength of his face. That everyone translates it differently. The way the Matzudas David explains says chozek ma'it pniyut nishtaneh l'shevach mish'ar bnei ha'adam. He says that the strength of a person's face is yeshuneh, also is different from anybody else. The person who's able to, a wise person has a countenance that shines, and also his whole face is different to anybody else. So who's this talking about? I think that on the simple level, mi kehech chacham, who's the chacham, and who's the person whose face shines. So you know this. I don't have to tell you this. Obviously, it's got to be that it has a reference in some way to Moshe Rabbeinu, whose face shone when he came down from Shemayim. So comes along Rashi, and Rashi says the following: Mi ba'olam chashuv ka'adam chacham. Who in this world is more important than Adam chacham? U'mi yadei peshet davar. He says, we find in Daniel that Daniel the prophet, mitoch chochmato sheyachacham beyirat Shemayim nidgalu lo razei pusharim. So Daniel, if you remember, Daniel is this man who interprets something that nobody else can interpret in the court of Belshazzar. And because he is able to interpret it, all of a sudden he gets this, incredible gravitas, incredible chashivas, importance in that. So what is he able? So therefore, says Rashi, the first concept of Pesher Davar is Pishron Shel Davar, the explanation of things is Daniel. And then he says, Umi Kamoshe, who's like Moshe? Osep Sharim Ben Yisrael Avim Shebashamayim. The concept of Pesher is not only an explanation, but it also is the coming together of things. Now I'll tell you, since COVID, I've kind of don't always get words that I want. When you make some type of compromise, that's the word I'm looking for. So who makes the compromise? Moshe Rabbeinu made the compromises between Am Yisrael and Avim Shebashamayim, and the Father in heaven. So therefore, what Kohelet is saying here is there are two aspects of Chokhmah. The one aspect of Chokhmah is to be able to understand certain technical details that appear that most people don't understand. Something has happened in the case of Daniel. There's this writing on the wall. All these things that happen, nobody understands. He's able to explain it. But then there's a much deeper level which I think is really the idea. It's all very nice to be a chacham who's able to understand things, but a real chacham, the real wise person, is the person who's able, as Rashi explains, is to be able to be like Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Because what did Moshe Rabbeinu did? He was able to create those compromises between Kodesh Baruch Hu, Bnei Yisrael. Bnei Yisrael went off the derech completely and did the things that they did. When they fetched, they complained, you name it, they did it. Moshe Rabbeinu is able to bring back the relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and them. And I think that is the highest level of Chokhmah, is the ability to come together, is to bring together fractured relationships. Whilst this is not the Lag BaOmer part, I do want to put at this point in time an aspect of Lag BaOmer, because my father-in-law told me something so interesting. In the Sfirat HaOmer, when we count the Omer, so depending on what your custom is, you'll say certain things after you've done the counting, and some people don't say things at all after the counting. But our custom, as a general rule, for your basic Ashkenazi custom, is you say the bracha, you say the day, Hayom Shloshim v'Shloshim Yom, today is 33 days, and then immediately after that we complete it, and we say Harachaman Yachzir Lanu Avodat Beit Hamikdash Timkoma B'Mehera Yameinu Amen Selah. We say this little Harachaman that Hashem should bring us back to the avodah, the service in the Beis Hamikdash. That's fantastic, and that's where we stop, and then we say the Aleinu. However, there is amongst the Hasidim and amongst the Sfardim a whole lot of other stuff that he said. And a whole lot of other stuff that he said, and one of those things is the Tzvibonu Shel Olam. It's a tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is very difficult to really understand, because it speaks about klipot and it speaks about all very deep Kabbalistic things. But one of the things it says is that we count, it says, I've counted today, may it be corrected, whatever blemish I've made, I may have caused in the Sphira, and each day has got its own Sphira. Each day has got its own specific energy of the day. So if you look at day 33, the day 33 is Hod Shebahod. Hod Shebahod is the Sphira Hod, which corresponds to a certain other energy, because every energy, all the Sphirot correspond to the Ushpizin. So we know Chesed is Abraham, and Gvura is Yitzchak, and Tiferet is Yaakov, etc., etc., etc. And Hod is Aaron HaKohen. So Aaron HaKohen, which is Hod, is now the day-to-day of Lag BaOmer is Hod Shebahod, which means it's the uber energy, the absolute energy of Aaron HaKohen. What was Aaron HaKohen's absolute energy's real energy? Was the concept of Ohev Shalom Vored Shalom, Ohev et Abriot Makarim in the Torah, the concept of his connection to Shleimus, to completion, to Shalom. So the Gemara tells us, the Midrash tells us that what would Aaron do? Aaron would go to Chaim and Shmuel are having a fight. So Aaron would go to Chaim and say, Chaim, I just want to tell you, Shmuel has got such charota that about what happened. Go and approach him. He already feels bad. And he would go to Shmuel and say, Shmuel, Chaim has to go and approach him. And they would come together, and through Aaron's insistence, they would be able to create that pressure. They'd be able to create the compromise in their feelings. They'd be able to sort things out and once again create shalom between them. That's the greatest chokhmah. So the day of Lag BaOmer really is an absolutely appropriate day for us to begin the learning of Perek Chet of Kohelet, because it speaks about the Rashi's second commentary on what it means. It speaks about the ability to create compromise in relationships that are fractured. It's such a powerful day today, but perhaps that is one of the things that we can take out of this, is the learning of Hod Shebahod, that to recreate fractured relationships. Okay, so that's the one thing that Rashi says. And then he says, "V'oz panav yishonem mishar habriot." He says that, and that the face of a chochem is completely different from anyone else, and that's why it says, "V'yiru migeshet elav kikaron or panav," and that's why they couldn't approach Moshe Rabbeinu, because his face was shining. So, what is the thing that makes the shining face of the Chacham. So if we go back and think about what we just spoke about, the in the Birkat Kohanim, we say Yivrecha Hashem Vishmarecha Yerashem Panav Elecha V'Chunecha Yisa Hashem Panav Elecha V'Yasem Lecha Shalom. We say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should turn his face to you and bring you shalom. What is the bracha? That's the final bracha. But the one before them is Ya'er Hashem Panav Elecha V'Chunecha. Hashem should shine his face towards you. Why? Because when a person is a chacham and brings shalom, then by definition their face is going to shine, because the shining is the sense of being able to bring the neshamas of different people together, so that there's no longer machlokas. And machlokas is the greatest thing that darkens the world in the most profound way. Okay, the Metzudas David explains, how does a chacham get to be the person that makes shalom? So he says the following. He says, "Ki ba'avur ha'chochma kulam mechavavim amarav v'nishmaim lo." He says that the chab is that because the person's got so much chochma, it always reminds me of Fiddler on the Roof, where the guys, when you're rich, they think you really know. The most important men in town will come and ask me, all the questions, because when you're rich, they think you really know, but when you really know, that's when they really are the people really value your words. They love the words that he says, and they listen to that person. And that's the thing that widens the heart of the person, and makes the countenance shine. And he says, that the chozek marit peniut nishtane l'shevach b'shar b'nei adam. It's the same thing we're saying over again, but it's just an amazing thing to understand that a person who's able to use their wisdom to assist other people is the person whose countenance shines completely all over. Having said that, let's continue with the next passage. Ani Pi melech shemor v'al divrat shvuat Elohim. He says, Ani, pi melech shemor. He says, therefore, because of this concept of the great chacham, lefichach, says Rashi, ani tzarich v'nachon lishmor pi malcho shel olam shehu atov v'shibukulan. Says, if you're going to say that the person who is wise is able to bring pshara, is able to bring connection, and his face shines, therefore what? I've got to certainly listen to the highest level of wisdom, which is the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because that's the greatest and the highest level, and the best of all. Elohim, and he says that you must remember, we made a shvua, we made an oath to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says Rashi, we swore at Chorev, we swore at Har Sinai, lishmor mitzvotav, to keep the mitzvahs of Hashem. That's the one way to understand it. What is this concept that I must ensure that I keep the shvua Elohim, the oath to Hashem, that I'm going to keep his mitzvahs? That chokhmah, wisdom, is not a thing in and of itself, but wisdom is the thing that demands from me. The more I know, the more I need to know that I've got to keep. Davar Acher, he says, let's look at another understanding. Ani nachon lishmor pi malchei ha'umot hamoshlim banu b'gulgolios va'aronos. Says, I need to remember that it's appropriate to keep lishmor pi malchei ha'umot hamoshalim banu b'gulgolios. Says, I've got to keep the word of the other kings that rule over us in the galus that we live. Rashi throws in this idea. He says it's appropriate for me to live in a place where laws and chokhmah has created a space for people to live together, to live in a country, to live in side by side. That's part of the reason why we daven every Shabbos for the Shlom HaMalchut. It's appropriate for me to be there, but however, I have to be very careful what happened, that those laws that I am adhering to do not break the laws of Elohim, do not break the laws of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when it comes to my oath to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is my primary space that I have to show allegiance to. And that's sometimes something that is very challenging for us, because we live in a world right now which is so complicated, so complex, and I don't mean this in the word that I mean it, but in non-binary, because we everything is just obfuscated, and because of that, it becomes quite difficult. We have to adhere to certain ways of engagement. I don't know if anybody saw that there was a certain thing in America where in Yeshiva University, where the LGBT community are suing Yeshiva University because Yeshiva University as a Torah institution does not want on its campus an LGBT plus club, which is appropriate for a Torah institution. However, the basis of their lawsuits is the fact that Yeshiva University is a university which also receives funding from the state, and the state laws do not allow any type of what's the word I'm looking for? Against God, sorry, my words are terrible today. Prejudice. Yeah, there you go. Or showing any prejudice against LGBT or anything like that, and therefore they're suing them to allow it. So it's fascinating, because that's really reflecting in these psukim. The way Rashi says it, right? Obviously, we've got allegiance to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's a given. But we also have to have allegiance to the state in which we live, the country in which we live, with the laws are moral. We had that issue when it was an apartheid state. But when there is a complete clash between the state instituted morality and Torah-driven morality, so then what do you do? And I think that's really reflected in here, where it's clear from Shlomo HaMelech that Val Dibras Shuas Elohim, that I've got to be my primary allegiance has to be the Shuas Elohim, the Shuas Elohim, my relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His laws. Now, and it's not easy, and it's complicated, and it's so nuanced, or maybe it's not as nuanced as we want it to be. It's very complicated, but all of these things need to be borne in mind. One of the things that I'm busy working on now is trying to understand the approach to transsexual halachic aspect of what happens to a person who's trans, to a man who's become a woman who's become a man, in terms of halacha, making minyan, not making minyan, where they should sit, how they should sit, putting on tefillin, not putting on tefillin, all those different things. They're all complicated. In the world in which we live, it's less complicated in a way, because we are saying that a man becomes a woman and shalom al Israel. But in halacha, it's not so simple. So we need to be able to say that my primary source of my approach to life is going to be, and that's what Shlomo HaMelech is saying, it's got to be the Torah. That's two psukim. Let's stop there in that for the moment, because what I would like to share with you is something very beautiful and important, I think, about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Give me 1 second. I just want to get the document. So the Gemara tells us, we know the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is this powerful character. He's the father of the Zohar. He's the father of Kabbalah. He's this powerful Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, and he really becomes the focus of Lag BaOmer, at least amongst the Hasidim and amongst the Sfaradim. By the Ashkenazim, it seems to be very much less so. There has, especially amongst the Litvishers, there's not such a big thing about Lag BaOmer. I think that's a chisaron in us, and that there's a lot of soul and heart in Lag BaOmer. So let's discuss it and see what it is. So we know the story. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is sitting with his chevra, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and they're sitting together and they're discussing the Romans. And with them is this other chap called Yehuda ben Gerim. Now, we're not sure who he is, but Yehuda ben Gerim is there. And what happens is, Rabbi Yehuda says, the Romans are terrific. They've created the marketplaces, they've created bridges, they've created bathhouses, wonderful stuff. Rabbi Yossi doesn't respond. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was fire. He was fire, he was passionate, he wasn't scared to say what he needed to say. So he says, everything that they did for their own good. They did not do it in any way, shape, or form for anybody else other than themselves. For example, why did they make the marketplaces? They needed somebody to put the prostitutes. Why did they make the bathhouses? Because they wanted to beautify themselves. Why did they make the bridges? Because they wanted taxes, because every time you wanted to cross from one side to another on the bridge, you'd have to pay a certain toll. So this is the discussion that's happening amongst these three Gedolim, and this chap, Yehuda ben Gerim, who's sitting there as well. Yehuda ben Gerim found it very interesting. So he started just telling a few people, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. And once the voice is out, that's part of the issue of Lashon Hara, part of the issue of telling secrets, all those different things. Once the voice is out, then the Romans hear about it. And now Rabbi Yehuda himself, who only said good things, he's given a prominent position. Rabbi Yossi is exiled. He didn't say anything. He didn't defend or not defend. He's exiled to a place called Tzipori, which is up in the north. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, so he is because of his negative sentiments towards the Romans, they put out a fatwa. Right? He has to be killed. But he hears about it. He hides in the base medrash with his son, and his wife brings him food. They're worried because they start looking for them in a much more careful way. He says, we're worried because if they capture my wife, then they'll torture her and she'll give away our position. So they run away and they run to the cave. They spend 12 years in the cave learning Torah. But the way the Gemara describes what they did is something we need to try and understand a little bit more in the few minutes that we've got. So what the Gemara says, that they arrive in the cave, and when they arrive in this cave, there's a miracle that happens. And the miracle is that a carob tree, a charuv, a tree, eitz charuv, and a ma'ayan ma'in, and a spring of water are created for them in order that they are able to have food and drink. Then what do? Then they sit in the sand up to their next learning. They take off their clothes while they're learning. They put their clothes back on when they need to daven, and they sit there for 12 years. And then in the 13th, and then they come out after 12 years. When they come out, it's pretty intense. They've been learning in Torah for 12 years. They come and they see guys are farming and people are doing and laughing and doing all the things that normal people do. They can't handle it. And like out of their eyes comes this fire, and they burn up everything that's around them. And the Batkol comes out and says, listen, I didn't teach you Torah so you could destroy the world. Go back into the cave. They go back into the cave for another year, for another 12 months. And then they come out, and it still says that Rabbi Lazar, who's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's son, he would look at certain people and start burning things up. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would be able to put out the flames and heal everything that his son destroyed. So that's the story of them coming out. So the Ben Yehoyada tries to understand, like, what is all the detail about? Why do you need to know what happened? That they had a carob tree, and that they had water, and that they took off their clothes and they put their clothes back on, and they're sitting in the sand, and they, what is all that all about? So he says the following. He says, what is the whole point here? If we understand, we spoke about how charif the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is absolute gevura. He's not scared of anything. And his being not scared of anything is his strength. But in the case of the Romans, it becomes in a way, a self-saboteur. However, says the Ben Yehoyada, this whole thing is a setup. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the fact that the three of them are sitting discussing the Romans, and this chap, Yehuda ben Gerim, is sitting there with them, who's a little bit of likes to speak about things. He's sitting there with him in order that it would be that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would have to go ultimately into the cave in order to do all the things that he does. Okay, so now he arrives in the cave and there's this massive miracle. What's the massive miracle? The miracle of the charuv. The charuv, this carob tree and the water. Says the Ben Yehoyada the following. He says, Min hashamayim, from heaven came the mituk hagvurot, the sweetening of the gevura of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. How? Because of the Hasidim, because of the chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son because of their learning of Torah, that sweetens the gevura of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And what is that? Charuv. Let's understand. What is charuv? Charuv is in gematria. Charuv is chet, reish, vav, bet, which is 216. Gematria of gevura is also 216. So the charuv comes to correspond to the gevura of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and the water by definition is always chesed. Water is chesed. So the waters come to balance the chesed, the gevura of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Then he says, also we have to understand, comes to teach them that also, that, and this is a difficult one for all of us, that they should accept the yisurin, the difficulties that they're going through. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and son, b'simcha, with joy, because when we accept the difficulties that we go through with simcha, with joy, with purpose, then the gevura becomes sweeter. We have to be misgaber over the challenges that we have. We have to overcome the challenges that HaKadosh Baruch Hu presents with us. But we can do it in one of two ways. We can either do it in a kind of a harsher way, or we can do it in a sweet way. And comes along the waters and the waters and the kruv and the charuv. These two things are coming there to show that we need to bring in the chesed in order to sweeten the gevura. Okay. Now, says this is Geshmak. This is really Geshmak. Why is it dafka those two things? Why was it a charuv? Why was it this carob and mayim? Because it could have been anything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have sent anything you wanted in order to sustain the two of them whilst they were there. So maybe we're going to say that there's something special about the carob tree. I don't know. I'm not so. I don't know anything about nutrition. But the Ben Yehoyada says that the reason it is because charuv and mayim, that's chet for charuv and mem for mayim, have, when you put the rosh tevah, when you put the those two letters there, they are mem chet. Mem chet is the word. Is the number 48. What is 48? So firstly, mem chet is moach, which is your brain. And that's a fundamental thing. But it's also the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. In the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot, Mishnah 6. We often don't get there because we're so busy with all the others and there's so much to learn. We don't get to chapter 6. In fact, chapter 6 is not really part of the original Mishnayos of Pirkei Avot. It doesn't really fit in with the others, but it's nonetheless it's in our canon as the as a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that says the following, and it's an amazing Mishnah because it really is a recipe. Every year, here's my confessions. Every year I mean to like do something profoundly with this Mishnah, and every year I don't, and then I always get reminded around this time, like halfway through Sfirat HaOmer. Remember, Sfirat HaOmer is 49 days. So there's 48, Memchet, sorry. So the gematria of Memchet is 48. So there's 48 ways. It says the following. The Torah is greater than kahuna, than even being a kohen, and even being a king. Because Malchus is acquired with 30 prerogatives, let's call them. And the kahuna is acquired with 24. So you've got 24 to become a kohen, you've got 30 to become a king. But the Torah is acquired with 48 things. Memchet, moach. Says the the Ben Yehoyada, that that the zchut of the Torah, b'shleimut, in its completeness, gave them the charib and the mayim, gave them the carib and the water. That's the memchet, because they had such power of their connection to Torah. They were able to fulfill all these 48 prerequisites in order to become the greatest Talmidei Chachamim of the time, and therefore they get the carib and the water. But I think fundamentally for me, the memchet is about moach, it's about consciousness, it's about putting things. Torah is about your brain. Obviously, we have to put things onto our hearts, but the only way we can put them onto our hearts in a real way is by ensuring that they're sitting in our heads. And that's why the learning of Torah becomes such an important and fundamental part of our Jewish existence. Okay, so now he says something really very, very, very important and nice. We understand what makes them so unbelievable. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So he sat for 12 years learning in a cave. But let's understand that the Gemara describes that they sat for 12 years living in a cave with chol, with ground, the sand up to their necks. So obviously, the reason why they did that is because they weren't wearing clothes. They took their clothes off. So they just sit there, and it's inappropriate to be learning Torah with your body exposed. Okay, I don't know how they did it. They're sitting all the sand up to their necks. Now, how do they do with the thumbs? That's a different discussion. The point is, says the Ben Yehoyada says, besides that simple understanding, we can understand that the kavanu b'zeh l'taken chet Adam Harishon says that in actual fact, what they were trying to do is that they were trying to fix up the damage that Adam Harishon did when he did the first chet. Why? Because what did Adam Harishon do? Adam Harishon, in the first chet, what he did, the way the Kabbalah explains it, is he's mafrid ha'alef. He separated the aleph. The aleph is the word aluf means like an officer. It's the pride of the human being. And there's aleph, dalet mem, which is the aluf, and dam, which is the blood. The pride of the human being is the aleph, which was separated from the dam. In other words, once you separate the pride of the human being, then you create dam. You leave it with dam, and dam means mortality. And so therefore, when Adam Harishon ate from the Eitz Hadat, he and Chava ate from them, they separated the grandeur of the human being on its ultimate level, and in doing that, they brought this mortality to the world. And so, what is the ultimate in the grandeur of the world? That's the learning of Torah. And so, therefore, they learn Torah. Haramusa ba'alef loshen aluf, that the Torah is the aleph. It's the first thing that comes into the world. And they're sitting in the chol, and they're sitting in the sand. And the sand, which he says we play with gematrias, has the same gematria as dam. Therefore, the whole point is to bring their Torah together with the sand, together with the dam, to reconnect the aleph to the dam, to reconnect the complete grandeur of the human being. And why is that so important? Because if you remember, they're sitting naked in the ground, covered by the sand, learning Torah. That's connecting them to the grandeur of the human being. And then it says that when they davened, what they did is that they got dressed in their clothes. So the Ben Yehoyada says, I don't understand. If they got dressed, obviously they got dressed in their clothes. Why do you have to tell me they got dressed in their clothes? To tell you that they never showed their nakedness to each other. Because the showing of nakedness is the first thing that Adam and Chava realized after they'd eaten from the Eitz Hadat. It would take them back to that. So therefore, what they do is that they reconnect the grandeur of the human being to one another. And the grandeur of the human being really is the deepest connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the moach, through the memchet. So therefore, when they go out and they see that Bnei Yisrael are busy doing the normal things that everybody does, they can't get it. That's not the grandeur of the human being. The grandeur of the human being is to go into HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore they start burning everything up. But that's not the way it is. And that's why they go there for 12 years. They go back for another year. Says the Ben Yehoyada, you know what? What does 13 correspond to? So you'll say 13 are the Midrash of Hashem. He says, hold on a second, it's much bigger than that. Because 12 are the tribes of Israel, correct? 12 are the Shvatim. However, we know that Yosef is divided up into two, Ephraim and Manasseh, which gives us how many? 13. So ultimately, just thinking about this, the Shvatim, the 12 tribes of Israel, connect to the Yud-based Shvatim, connect to the 12 tribes connect to, plus the 13 to the 13 attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now you've got this powerful concept of the fact that they were in there for 12 years was for the 12 tribes, that it wasn't enough. They need to have the 13th tribe as well. Who's the 13th tribe? The 13th tribe is Yosef. Yosef is the man who brought peace amongst all of Bnei Israel when they came to Mitzrayim. And so therefore, Lag BaOmer becomes this time of Shalom, going all the way back to the Hoyt Shebahoyt. It's the time of Shalom, of the coming together of everything, of the grandeur of the human being, of the ability of the human being to be able to connect with his moach. When we connect with our moach, with our brains, through our consciousness, and we don't allow our hearts to run the way we feel, then we're able to create Shalom amongst each other, because then we are real Chachamim. We're able to be Mi Yodeya, Pesha, Davar, as I said right at the beginning of the Shir. Who is able to bring the hearts of the people together through compromise can only be done with Chokhmah, not only through heart. And so therefore that is our Shir today of Kohelet, understanding that everything is connected. Right, amazing hashgacha that we started with this, that the ability for us to bring shalom amongst each other is the fundamental value that we have in our world. That is what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was taught by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the teaching that he teaches us is the same thing. That's why we bring the fire on the night. The fire is the fire of Torah. It's the fire of connection, the fire of warmth. Have a beautiful Shabbos, everybody. And Bezrat Hashem, we will continue next week. Hopefully on campus, even if it's a little bit cold. God bless, guys.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbos.
Shabbos. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Rosh. Shalom, everyone.